National self-interest is the true meaning of loyalty. To call a man loyal because he never betrayed his country is to restate the story of the honest brakeman. He never stole a boxcar. Relatively few persons in a normal lifetime are presented with the opportunity or temptation to give aid or comfort to the enemy in time of war. All federal officers swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So long as they don't pass atomic secrets or commit some form of malfeasance, they are true to their oaths negatively. And if they keep duty hours and get a modicum of work done, they have complied with their vows, though feebly. But very little praise is due this negative aspect of loyalty. Ill fares the country whose patriotism is a matter of virginity instead of virility. Our success as a nation is told in positive, masculine terms of self-assertion. In times gone by, this aggressive declaration of national self-interest has ordered and even expelled old world powers from the Western Hemisphere, pushed our continental borders to their limit, and given us a few daft notions of manifest destiny. The expulsion and expansion movements have had their day, but there's still some hair left on the chest of our loyalty concepts. The promise to adhere to the Constitution means to adhere to that, and nothing else besides. Divided and diluted patriotism is not what the founders had in mind when they prescribed the basic oath of office. And yet, in the mid-20th century, there are exponents of lesser Americanism who achieve not only social acceptance, which is bad enough, but social approbation, which is incredible. It is a policy of this interpreter of the Federalist Papers to speak ill only of the dead, and then not very often. For that reason, these examples of partial patriots may only be generalized, but you have known their names and seen their faces. 1. The world statesman. He can be sufficiently described as an American politician with a roving eye for exotic interests. Although usually elected and always paid by the American taxpayers, this fellow is a philanderer with foreign nations. In earlier days, he was apt to be the misunderstood patriot who protests, when caught, that his intrigues to overthrow our government were really, though we didn't understand, for America's greater glory and advancement. Such a man, for instance, was Aaron Burr. His modern prototype has none of that dash and romance. He affects instead a pious concern for countries not his own, and he meddles with them to the prejudice and neglect of his own. Any wife will recognize these symptoms in an erring husband, but a nation is more naive and often fails to see that a president, senator, or ambassador is being unfaithful when he acts in the interests of somebody else's government. This very thing has happened a number of times since Sarajevo. Our world statesmen have a habit of rising above their oaths of office to serve or to save some charming little nation or noble old empire, which is not, however, their lawful charge. This is not treason, but it is disloyalty. Sometimes the infatuation of the world statesman is an Oedipus complex for his fancied mother country. Sometimes the sentiment arises from boyhood travels abroad, from stamp collections, from pictures of old sailing ships. There is an ultra-modern form of world statesmanship wherein the practitioner plays the role of a global polygamist. His own country is merely one of the household wives in a super state. There is a patriarchal delusion in this role. It often overtakes elderly politicians. They easily succumb to suggestions that they resemble Old Testament prophets, and that as world figures, their names will live in history. But young or old, cynical or silly, an American public servant who trespasses outside the bounds of his oath is being adulterous toward his country. Loyalty is restrictive and jealous by its very nature. No man can serve two masters, or be true to more than one wife. Plural patriotism to other states or to a superstate is infidelity to America. 2. The free trader. He is more apt to be a fool than a knave, but there are both. In either case, the idea which obsesses the free trader is the exact opposite of national self-interest. There are industrialized island nations like Great Britain and Japan, which prosper by export of manufactured goods and are advantaged when their purchaser nations have no tariff walls. There are raw material regions like India, Australia, and the Malay Peninsula, which are commercially benefited by free from tariff markets. The free trader, when he's a dupe or a cunning schemer, whether he's a dupe or a cunning schemer, is promoting an idea which is admittedly advantageous and beneficial to many foreign nations. But this idea of no tariff or low tariff is not in the American interest. It's impossible for a true man to promote free trade and yet hold to the basic federal oath, which should now be read in full and in context. I solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. So thick is the smokescreen around this subject of world trade that the American layman often sees nothing but the congenial adjective free looming through the man-made curtain of mystery. The adjective seems attractive because it carries connotations of liberty and of something for nothing, both dear to the American heart. But the expression free trade is only a product of the sloganeers. Its connotations could more accurately be those of no pay or low pay labor in foreign lands and of built-in bankruptcy for American small business. Tariff walls, like the armed forces, are part of the American defense system. They are rightly and unapologetically called protective tariffs. Since the first Congress, they have guarded our hard-won homemade independence, which must have economic integrity, or it cannot have political and military integrity. The economic, political, military relationship is too obvious to need any laboring. The need for tariff protection against cheap foreign labor is almost equally clear. What is perhaps harder to see, because of the propaganda barrage, is that all major nations have protective tariffs. The United States has the lowest tariffs among the major nations. And 90-some% of raw materials can enter our ports with no tariff charge whatever. These facts are obscure to laymen only because of the smokescreen. The figures are available in government documents and have been presented again and again in public places. But the tall tales against terrible tariffs still persist. The free traders know that the global work wage is far below that paid in America. They know that America has a peculiar need for tariff protection in that we produce for our own consumer market. They know that our natural resources of the Western Hemisphere and our native inventiveness make us literally self-sufficient in the things we need to fight a war or to live in peace. Why then do the free traders urge and promote the abolition of tariffs? The answer needs to be known. The answer is that free trade is a doctrine for the economic uplift of have-not nations. It is one of those supposed cure-alls for world poverty. It is an international share the wealth proposition, whereby America's riches would be pooled and distributed out among the poorhouse nations and among those who talk poor. Whatever can be said for its philanthropic value, and that's another story for a future paper in this series, the free trade doctrine is plainly in the self-interest of other nations, but not of the United States of America. Well, what business has an oath-taking federal officer to be working in any self-interest except our own? 3. The welfare statesman. All men, as the Declaration of Independence puts it, are created equal. And the founders never presumed to improve upon their creator's handiwork. The rich and poor, the intelligent and stupid, are held equal before God and in their unalienable rights. There is nothing in the American tradition that justifies the effort to handicap talent and to level out wealth. The American Constitution is known to history as a sanctifier of contracts, a protector of property, and an encourager of private initiative. All men have equal rights to succeed, and to succeed in unequal degrees according to their worth. I agree with you that there is, wrote Thomas Jefferson to John Adams, a natural aristocracy among men. The grounds of this are virtue and talents. This natural aristocracy I consider the most precious gift of nature for the instruction, the trusts, the government of society. End quote. Charity, in its original meaning, love, is a benignity that is extended from man to man. It is a social obligation by nature, not a political activity. And even when good will to mankind is the only motive, and even when a desirable purpose can be demonstrated, to twist the Constitution to fit an emergency or a social gain is to play the Constitution false. This was done many times in the New Deal days. It was done, and a subservient Supreme Court was appointed to make it legal. Another time will do for detailing the damage done by torturing the clauses of the Constitution to make general welfare and interstate commerce mean what the New Deal managers wanted them to mean. But for present purposes, it's fitting to show what was in the framers' mind on the equality of the right to succeed. James Madison, writing in the Federalist number 10, gave the matter this thumbnail treatment. The diversity in the faculties of men, from which the rights of property originate, is not less an insuperable obstacle to the uniformity of interests. The protection of these faculties is the first object of government. How far the welfare statesmen have fared from that first object of government, and how false they have been in their oaths to support and defend the Constitution. Again, this is not treason. It is mere disloyalty, if you will. But it's doubtful if all the traitors, from Benedict Arnold through the Rosenbergs, did more to destroy the country than these oath breakers who have subverted the equal rights of men to gain and retain what their talents deserve. These three samples, the world statesman, the free trader, the welfare statesman, are grabbed from the bag to illustrate what is happening to our eroded sense of loyalty. Such things, and worse, will keep on happening unless Americans junk the idea that their self-interest is something of which to be ashamed. National self-interest began when the Declaration of Independence laid claim to unalienable rights and charged King George III with a long, specific list of repeated injuries and usurpations to the American people and their property. The Constitution's famous preamble is a clear statement of self-interest for ourselves and our prosperity. One after another of the early documents, the Federalist, Washington's Farewell Address, Jefferson's first inaugural, the Monroe Doctrine, spoke without a quaver for American advantage. Our leaders should be speaking and acting for the same thing today. Indeed, it's disloyal for a federal officer to be speaking and acting for anything else.